Vidar returns. Welcome back. Today we're going to challenge Sam Harris and his philosophical views on morality. Although my previous content may indicate otherwise, I do respect Sam Harris as a highly influential person, and Sam Harris, when presented with compelling evidence, appears to be open-minded and able to change his beliefs. A common question from religious people to atheists is, where does your morality come from? Sam Harris should know, as he wrote his own book on morality titled The Moral Landscape. I intend to show some overarching flaws and consequences with Sam's morality, though there's an excellent video online that critiques Sam's book from a purely philosophical perspective and regarding the history of morality, and I recommend watching it too. It's by the YouTuber Cuck Philosophy. I'll put a link to it in the description. There's also a video online of Ben Shapiro with Sam Harris, in which Sam Harris paraphrases from his book on the general view of where he sees morality coming from. Link to that also. And combining information from both sources, I'll try to lay out Sam's definition of morality and give my own arguments on why I view Sam's morality as flawed from the perspective of VidarReturns. In the video with Ben Shapiro, Sam spends a lot of time doing his usual speech about how many problems exist in religious texts. He always qualifies what he says by saying some things in the religious texts are good and others are not, and concluding the text is not a divine message. While I agree that there are many flaws with popular religious texts, the problem is that you can't say what is or is not good unless you have a definition of what is good. In his interview with Ben Shapiro, he specifically uses the words happiness and misery in referencing good and bad. And in his book, Sam defines goodness as, quote, the well-being of conscious creatures, end quote. Now I want to steelman Sam's ideas as solidly as I can, trying to honestly portray his position accurately. His book states two primary points about well-being. 1. That some people have better lives than others, and 2. These differences are related in some lawful and not entirely arbitrary way to states of the human brain and to states of the world. In his book, he proposes many contrasting stories, those of having a virtually heavenly existence on earth and those of experiencing an enduring hell. Whatever brings well-being or happiness is good, and that which brings misery is bad. I'm not going to elaborate on the stories here, but Sam doesn't really specify much in terms of what is universally good. From his example stories, we might conclude Sam would say circumstances that universally cause misery would result from starvation, immediate danger of death, lack of good health, most forms of physical pain, or mental anguish. I must note here that many of the circumstances that cause misery are very abstract and not strictly defined. Sam doesn't lay out very specific things like do not lie to people. The final point to make is that he is primarily concerned with consequences. The intent of people's actions are not significant. If the consequences of someone's actions increase happiness or well-being, then it is deemed good action. Sam believes that science could usefully define morality according to such facts about people's well-being, that morality must consider everything from emotions and thoughts to the actual actions and their consequences. Now that's the summary of how I understand Sam's position on morality, and if I've gotten this wrong, please leave a comment on how absent-minded I am. So, first things first. As a minor critique, just to start off with, why does Sam limit morality to, quote, conscious creatures? And it seems very arbitrary. The word brain is used many, many times in his book, and Sam's expertise is in the study of brains, so perhaps he has a bias towards creatures with brains. Or perhaps Sam is implicitly basing his morality on the foundation of some religion or other religions. A solid explanation is not given, but not everyone feels the same as Sam. There are people that believe you can be immoral towards all life. Well, we could have a look at some of them now.
Deep in the woods of North Carolina, eco group called Earth First bewails the violation of American nature.
I want to mourn the loss of all the old growth trees I've seen, and tell them that we love them and that we don't want them to die, that there are some people here who do care. So I want you to know that, trees, that we care.
I think that we've lost our identity as we have evolved into technology and into industrialized society. Bring me to this cathedral. Bring me to those guys. Bring me to this rock that has the most incredible life.
Clearly, not everyone shares the idea that humans should limit morality to, quote, conscious creatures. The question is, why should anyone follow Sam's limited morality over another morality that would include being good towards all existing life? Where is the justification? Again, I suspect it has something to do with Sam's bias towards beings with brains, but I'll get more into this later. Number 2. There seems to be a problem of abstractness to Sam's morality. Sam believes in defining morality according to such, quote, facts about people's well-being. The problem is that many of these facts differ from person to person without universally applicable principles of what he considers well-being. Without universally applicable principles of what we would consider well-being, we must have some way to analyze every single individual in society, psychologically or otherwise. For example, having a pet increases the well-being and happiness of many people in the world, so giving someone their first pet could be seen as a moral good. But it's not for everyone. For some people, taking care of a pet is an absolute source of misery, and there are actually people that simply dislike pets in general. Or perhaps someone would only be happy if they had a pet snake, but giving a pet snake to the wrong person could terrify them. Another example could be just something as simple as telling a joke. Telling a good joke could make someone laugh and brighten their day, while telling the same joke to someone else could offend them and trigger them into a negative psychological state. The abstractness of Sam's morality means that what would be moral to do for one person would be immoral to do for another person, and the only way we could know many of these, quote, facts would be by building a sort of scientific profile on every person. To me, this seems a little extreme. Who's going to keep record of everyone's profile? We could see a potential for this to play right into an Orwellian future where Big Brother has a psychological profile of every individual, and it's for their own good, of course, because it's the moral thing to do, and the state needs to enforce morality. This leads me to number 3. On page 45 of his book, Sam states that, quote, to say an act is morally necessary or evil or blameless is to make a tacit claim about its consequences in the lives of conscious creatures, end quote. Sam's morality is centered around consequentialism, that if actions result in well-being to those who are alive, then the actions are therefore good. Now, I may have missed it, but Sam doesn't seem to address conflicts where one person's life is deemed to cause suffering in the lives of others. A murderer would be seen as someone who causes suffering. This is a conflict of people's well-being. Does this murderer still have a right to well-being? If the consequence of executing this murder brings the greatest well-being of others in society, then does execution become the logical course of action? Here we would have a case of the well-being of the many trumps the well-being of the few. And what if we have a world where many people are starving, and there are a few people that have exorbitant wealth? Would it be moral to take the wealth of the few to feed the many that are starving? So long as well-being is overall increased, it would seem to be good according to Sam's morality. Sam's morality can't say, don't steal, or respect the property of others, because if stealing can increase well-being more than respecting people's property, then it would necessarily be good. This idea of morality could lead someone to break into Sam's home, steal his large flat-screen television, and pawn it to feed hungry children around the world. Just to be clear, I'm not recommending anyone do that, but according to Sam's morality, it would seem to be a morally good action. The huge problem I see here is that Sam's morality only considers the well-being of those here and alive today. We can imagine a scenario of redistributing the wealth of billionaires in such a way that it massively increases the well-being of the majority currently in society for the rest of their lives, and results in a society with no more millionaires or billionaires in society, everyone of roughly equal financial worth. Now this would be a kind of soft communism, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Today there are wealthy people who are able to take their wealth and resources and efficiently manage them, building factories and increasing technology, which increases their personal wealth and also increases the combined wealth of society. When wealth is taken away from these individuals, it ceases to continue generating wealth in society. But if the more important goal is to increase the well-being of everyone alive, then that should be an acceptable outcome. Though this kind of soft communism doesn't account for the well-being of future generations and people who do not yet exist, we could justify that commercial and technological improvements do not need to continue for future generations, because the important value is the well-being of those who are alive today. We can sacrifice the future for the well-being of the current generation. If human civilization ends the day after this current generation dies, then it was all worth it, because we had well-being. Hello everyone, sorry for the intermission. When I tried to upload this video, I was reminded of my account restrictions and had to break it into 2 parts. My apologies for that. Please click on the link in the description to continue to part 2 and the final point, which ultimately wrecks Sam Harris's moral landscape.